Right now, the day's biggest news stories from a Vegas perspective. This is the Vegas Take with Sharp and Shapiro.
All right, welcome back. It is the Vegas State rolling out hour number 2. C-Win in studio on a Monday. My name is Brian Shapiro. Welcome back to the show. Appreciate you joining us. A lot to get to, a lot to go over. Of course, we have this impeachment inquiry, the hearings continuing. And boy, this week is going to be salacious, I guess you could say. Must-see TV. Some people are calling it boring. I don't find this boring at all. I find it sad that it's gotten to this point, but not boring. And the man joining us on the line with us right now, he is a war hero. He is a veteran. And he is also a congressman out of Massachusetts, a former presidential candidate, and we respect him a great deal, and we always love it when he takes some time to join us on the show. Seth Moulton joining us right now. Seth, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
Hey, it's great to be back. I always enjoy being on with you guys.
Thanks, Seth. That means a lot. We appreciate that. So much to get to you in such a short period of time. Before we get to the impeachment inquiry stuff, what were your thoughts on Deval Patrick entering the race? See, I think it's already diluted. You know, there's just too many people up there on the stage. How do you feel about this being there in Massachusetts?
Well, look, I mean, I'm not a political pundit, but I'm friends with Deval Patrick, and I know him well. He and his wife have been strong advocates, in particular for mental health care, which is something I talked about during my campaign. It's something that's really important to me. And the fact that they've been so open about their experiences there is something that I particularly admire. And it's an issue that I want to see on the debate stage. So, that's one thing I'll just throw out there that I admire about him and appreciate about his candidacy. But, look, this race is kind of all over the place, and who knows where it's headed.
That's true. Well, I wanted to ask you about the race. I'm a big supporter of Mayor Pete Buttigieg. I think he's a great guy, extremely intelligent, and I think he's a little bit more to the center, which I think the Democratic Party needs, quite frankly. What do you make of this rise in the polls and the surging Mayor Pete?
Well, he's obviously had a lot of resources. He got in the race very early, well ahead of me and most of the other candidates, and raised a tremendous amount of money. And that's given him the resources to put people on the ground, particularly in Iowa. So, if you look at his place in the national polls, it's not very impressive at all. But if you look at his place on the Iowa polls, he's doing really, really well. And there's a couple polls that even have him in first, I think. And so, he obviously has the volunteers and the paid staff on the ground to get the word out about his candidacy, and that's made a difference that you're seeing pay off right now.
Also on the Democratic side, of course, Michael Bloomberg is someone that is, being talked about. And while I don't know exactly the details regarding whether or not he's officially filed or if it's something that he intends to do, but wanted to get your thoughts also on the fact that, maybe the possibility of having him also in the mix on the Democratic side.
Well, I mean, in full disclosure, I know Mayor Bloomberg as well. He was a fantastic mayor for New York City. And obviously has a perspective on, on just managing a large organization like New York City. I mean, New York City has a budget that's bigger than a lot of state budgets. I mean, he's got a tremendous skill set that he brings to this race. And, he's also been a tremendous advocate on environmental causes. I don't think there's anyone who's spent more of his personal money on gun reform. So he's also got an interesting perspective to add to this race. But, all these candidates have to ask, what are actually my chances of getting through a Democratic primary coming in this late in the game? And I started my campaign in late April. And I got to tell you, the number one mistake that I made was just starting too late. There were an awful lot of people who said to me, Seth, I would have supported you, but I'm already supporting Mayor Pete or someone else.
Right. Yeah.
And if April was too late, you got to wonder how it's going to work for these candidates now. Having said that, obviously there's people who are interested in them.
Yeah, and there's no question. Obviously, as you know, we wish you were on that stage, and we wish you entered the race a little bit earlier. And I have no doubt you would have been on that stage if you did. If you're just joining us, we are speaking to Massachusetts Congressman Seth Moulton, former presidential candidate as well. Okay, so let's talk about the impeachment inquiry. As you know, Seth, we have Gordon Sondland, who's going to be testifying on Wednesday. To me, and you correct me if you think I'm wrong, Seth, I think this is one of the biggest witnesses, if not the biggest one, for the Democrats, because this is a guy not with second or third hand knowledge. This is a guy with firsthand knowledge who changed things up a little bit, who heard the phone call. And to me, this is going to be a pivotal moment so far for this inquiry on whether Trump abused his power. Would you agree with that?
Well, from what I know, that's probably right. I mean, this is Trump's hand-picked guy who initially defended the president. Then it turns out he, in my opinion, he thought he was lying, and so he re-remembered some things or something like that. I can't remember exactly how he phrased it, and came back and changed his testimony and said that, yes, in fact, there was a quid pro quo. The president was withholding aid to try to get them to pursue this phony investigation. And it was very clear, the president made it clear to the ambassador that that's exactly why he was doing it. So the fact that this is a Trump ally who initially tried to defend the president and then realized he was on the wrong side of history and changed his testimony, I mean, that's pretty significant. At the end of the day, this is about more than one phone call, though. It's a pattern of behavior. And we have multiple witnesses testifying publicly and privately that President Trump used official government business for his own personal political gains, by asking a foreign country to investigate his political rival. And that, I mean, if that's not a high crime, the Constitution says we impeach presidents for high crimes and misdemeanors. If withholding an arms deal from an ally for personal political gain isn't a high crime, I don't know what is.
Seth, I want to get your take also on this whole narrative that's put out there regarding, the atmosphere surrounding this entire impeachment inquiry out in public. There's been words used like pizzazz. It lacks excitement. And look, to me, I just think it's absolutely ludicrous that we're discussing whether or not this is some type of Broadway show or reality show that's fun for the public to watch, when in reality, it should be about, we're just getting to the facts, right? We're just trying to get to a point where we can establish whether or not our commander-in-chief, our president of the United States, actually engaged in wrongdoing, high crimes and misdemeanors. To me, I'm just absolutely blown away at the adolescent kind of attitude that's being taken by some people out there regarding whether or not these should have pizzazz or be exciting when it comes to these proceedings.
I mean, I totally agree with you. I mean, this is very serious stuff.
Yes.
And frankly, much more serious than like the stuff that Clinton was accused of. Of course, it's just, the salacious details of, sex acts in the Oval Office or whatever else. I mean, that obviously captures people's attention, and you remember the stain on the dress and all this crazy stuff. But at the end of the day, let's step back and look at these crimes in comparison. I mean, just look at what Trump has done in comparison to what Nixon did, for example. I mean, Nixon, it was just sort of a first-rate burglary that his people pursued, and then he tried to cover it up and he lied about it. This is much bigger than burglary. I mean, there are lives on the line, thousands of lives on the line, on the ground in Ukraine. They're counting on our military assistance. Our entire State Department, military, everyone is geared towards supporting Ukraine against the threat of Russia. And Trump comes in and tries to undermine all of that, tries to undermine all these people literally on the front lines in a war just to get the government to investigate his political rival. I mean, again, if this isn't a high crime, it's well beyond a misdemeanor, I'll tell you that much.
Yes.
If this isn't a high crime, I don't know what is. And just because it doesn't have salacious details about sex or whatever, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be taking it seriously.
What would you say to some of your friends on the right that are in office that are even going to the extreme and saying that even if there is a quid pro quo, that is not enough to impeach the president? What would you say to them right now?
I would say to them, tell me how you're going to explain this to your grandkids. Seriously, tell me how you're going to explain siding with this criminal when your grandkids ask. Because the history is very clear, and the story gets worse every single day for the president. This is completely indefensible. And history will remember political courage. It won't remember, partisan politics on behalf of people who are just trying to defend the guy in power right now. And that's exactly what they're doing. I mean, I don't know anyone who seriously thinks this isn't a massive big deal.
And I would even
it's just that they're trying to defend the president.
And
it's
Seth,
politically advantageous right now.
Yeah, and Seth, I would even take it a step further. Brian and I had a chance. We saw Juan Williams on Fox News yesterday. He talked about President Trump and his perspective on this. And look, if we take President Trump at his word, where he says, you know what, I did nothing wrong.
Perfect
that was
call.
a perfect phone call. Then it gives you every indication that the president of the United States thinks it's okay, and he can just go on and do it again. You know what I'm saying? I mean, to me, this
Absolutely.
is lunacy that we would take that viewpoint of, oh, you know what? It was a perfect phone call. Everything was just fine. And so, I guess, if that's the case, and there's a lot of Republicans that are on board with this, if they're saying that, there was no quid pro quo, there was nothing wrong with the phone call, they are taking that exact perspective that the president is.
I mean, the absurdity of trusting a guy who we know lies every day. I mean, even his supporters say, oh, yeah, well, I know he doesn't always tell the truth. Okay, this guy lies every single day, every hour.
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
Lying, okay? So the fact that you would trust him in just saying, oh, it's a perfect phone call, and not trust people, like the ambassador, who, I'm not talking about Sondland, I'm talking about Ambassador Taylor, who is a decorated Vietnam veteran. You're going to trust a draft dodger who lies every hour of every day over a career State Department professional who graduated from West Point and actually did his duty in going to serve in Vietnam and did it heroically, while Trump was sending someone else in his place because he lied about his feet.
Yeah, no, you're right.
It's so absurd. And the point is that, someday this is really going to come back to, the rooster's going to come home. And these Republicans are going to have to explain why they were so immoral, so fundamentally immoral in siding with a criminal when the national security of the United States was on the line. Mm-hmm. And they may be able to find comfort by watching Fox News today and find, that some people on there. But this is akin to people who supported terrible leaders throughout history and, have to then go explain it to this. I mean, I have a friend who grew up in Germany, and some of his relatives supported Hitler back in the day. And there were a lot of people who supported him. In fact, Hitler got democratically elected. But now he's got to explain how his family could do that. And that's why I say to these Republicans, tell me how you're going to explain this to your grandkids.
Yeah,
because it may not be tomorrow, but sometime, 10, 20 years from now, you're clearly going to be on the wrong side of history.
And, one of those Republicans who I do have a lot of respect for, Kasich, will be joining us later on this week. And even though he's not running for office right now, he's got a new book out, but he's always been honest when it comes to the president. We respect him a great deal. And that's kind of what you're talking about, having a little bit of backbone. If you're just joining us, we're speaking with Massachusetts Congressman and obviously war veteran Seth Moulton, former Democratic presidential candidate as well. Okay, Seth, so it doesn't even end there. Let's talk about I'm not going to use the word witness tampering, but how about witness harassment? Donald Trump has done that several times in the last week, trying to discredit these witnesses, trying to intimidate them. And in fact, that's even come up in testimony, and it's come up with some of your Democratic coworkers up there in Washington in talking to these witnesses about that if they do feel intimidated, and some of them do. Can you talk to me about that, and how is it possible that we have a president right now
live tweeting
while you have a witness up there on the stand using intimidation tactics, and there are not Republicans screaming up to high heaven about how wrong this is? I mean, explain that to me.
Well, there's a reason why Profiles in Courage, the book about political courage that John F. Kennedy wrote, or more accurately, his speechwriter wrote. And there's a reason why that book's a thin book. It's unusual to find someone like your next guest who's going to come on and criticize someone in their own party. But here's the bottom line: we all got to understand this is a conscious strategy on the part of the president. Think about it. He got accused of withholding military aid from Ukraine. So what does he do next? He goes on live TV and he says, China, you should investigate things too. Just to sort of try to normalize it, to try to make everybody think, oh, geez, he's just doing so many things wrong. Whatever, it's not all a big deal. Well, this is a big deal. Every one of these things is a big deal. And the reason why I was one of the earliest Democrats, even before Elizabeth Warren, by the way, to support impeaching the president, to go through this process, to having this inquiry, is because the message at the end of the day can't be, okay, you can break the law in all these different sorts of ways, but just don't withhold military aid from Ukraine and then you won't get in trouble, right? If the message coming out of this is it's okay for presidents to intimidate witnesses, it's okay for presidents to obstruct justice, as Robert Mueller made it clear he did. It's okay for presidents to profit off the office. That's called violating the emoluments clause of the Constitution. I mean, an explicit violation of the Constitution of the United States. It's okay to do that. Just don't withhold military aid from an ally, and you'll be fine. So my point is that we can't let Trump get away with any of this stuff, because we live in a country where the fundamental principle is that nobody is above the law.
Seth, let's talk about the media for a second. As you know, many people on the right, including the president all the way down, they want to call CNN and MSNBC fake news, right? The president has been attacking the media from the get-go on the campaign trail. I want to discuss with you what is on the front of the Fox News website right now, because it is laughable to me. This is the top story right on the Fox News website, where millions of people, I would imagine, are going to this website every day. Fox News exclusive. White House official sues media publication over Ukraine story. Eyes shift roll. That is the main story. And then we have a story about Mike Huckabee, who says the impeachment hearings are going to lead to a landslide reelection of Donald Trump. You know, they want to call CNN Fox News. They want to call CNN fake news and MSNBC. There's nothing up there about the actual legitimacy of the impeachment inquiry. There's nothing up there about what these witnesses are testifying to in regards to, what Donald Trump did in that call and what he did maybe prior to the call withholding aid. But they want to talk about some White House official suing a media publication. This is an absolute disgrace as far as I'm concerned.
Because Fox News does exactly what the president does. They try to change the channel, try to change the story, turn people's attention.
Yeah.
When President Trump went against the advice of every single military advisor he's ever had, including Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis, and retreated from Syria, abandoning our allies in the fight against ISIS and allowing ISIS prisoners to escape so they can attack us again. When he did that, which was so indefensible, and to their credit, there were a few Republicans who even spoke up and said, yeah, this is bad.
Lindsey Graham.
This is bad,
yeah.
Right? So when that happened that morning, I went to foxnews.com because I wanted to see what they were saying. I said, how are they going to explain this? And I'll tell you how. They didn't even mention it. Biggest news story of the month, and you couldn't even find it on foxnews.com because they just didn't want anybody to know. So Fox News is about entertainment. They're about entertainment for a certain point of view. And I was told this by a Fox executive. I went down there as a freshman of Congress, and I said, look, I want to get on your network more because I think you need to have a little more balance and show another perspective. And I'm a veteran, I should be appealing to your audience, conservatives like veterans and all that. And they looked at me and they said, Seth, we're not in the news business. We're in the entertainment business.
Wow.
And we know our audience.
So you're telling me that an executive – so you go into – let's go back to this because I find this very interesting. You go into Fox News. I would imagine this happened when you were running for president, and you're trying to get more appearances on Fox News, which I would have totally supported. I think more Democrats need to go on Fox News. And you're telling me an executive at Fox News looked at you in the eye and said, we're not in the news business. We're in the entertainment business.
That's right. Wow. That's right. That was their explanation. And so, it's just laughable. I mean, MSNBC may be a little right of center.
Right.
They're a little bit off of left of center rather. They're a little bit off the center line.
Sure.
But I mean, Fox is so far out in right field. I mean, they're off the map.
Yeah. You're right. Yeah, you're right. They are.
So Seth, of course,
they're like so far right. They're behind home plate. Find that ball.
Little baseball reference never hurt anybody, right? Of course, look, Seth, because obviously, we understand the focus on these impeachment hearings because they are historic. There's only been a handful of presidents who've dealt with it, but there are, the average Americans out there who have to ask the question, and I want to pose that to you as someone who's been in Congress and is in Congress, is that we can walk and chew gum at the same time, right? We are in a position where Washington D.C. can go through these proceedings, and you guys can also get things done legislatively, right? I mean, we all understand when President Clinton was going through this back in the 90s that he was still in the process of dealing with his constituents and dealing with other people in Washington D.C. So this is something that we can do, right? We can handle these impeachment proceedings, but we can also get the work done for the American people that they need done.
Well, that's exactly what we've been doing.
Mm-hmm.
We've been doing that. In fact, we have a big showdown this week on funding the government. But the Democratic House of Representatives has passed our appropriations bills. 96%, I think it is.
Nice.
Appropriations have been passed. We're just waiting on the Senate. Everything's in the Senate. And we passed historic gun reform in the House of Representatives. It's not even getting a vote in the Senate. We passed historic election reform and election security measures through the Democratic House. Mitch McConnell won't even give it a vote. And so all these things, look, I know gun reform is a divisive issue. We've found some bills that are bipartisan, but I know it can be divisive, and there will be some Republicans who vote against it. But my God, have the courage to do your job and actually have a vote. At least have a vote. Mitch McConnell won't even allow a vote on these things. So when people say Congress isn't getting anything done, it's not Congress as a whole. It's just the Senate. Mitch McConnell has turned the Senate into a legislative graveyard. And you're talking to a very bipartisan member. I'm someone who works across the aisle. I'm someone who's passed a lot of bipartisan bills. I've done a lot of work for veterans. I'm always working on bipartisan stuff.
Yeah, you are.
And I'm always trying to get it through the Senate, too. But there's one reason that's not happening right now, and his name is Mitch McConnell.
You're right. And by the way, let me just say this for the record. If there's anybody that wants to talk about courage, it should be you, because you served this country honorably. You risked your life for this country, and you always should be commended as any other veteran. I would say the same thing. Seth, I always appreciate it so much when you take the time to join us. Appreciate your insight and the good work you are doing up there in Massachusetts, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on, and I really hope we can get you on again sometime soon, okay?
Appreciate it, Seth.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take some calls next time, too.
I would love to do that. Let's do that next time. I know you like taking calls. Thank you so much, Seth. We really appreciate it. All right. Take care.
Thanks,
All
Seth.
right.
Take care.
That is Seth Moulton, congressman out of Massachusetts. Next time he comes on, we will take calls. But we will take calls when we come back. 257-5396 is the number to reach us. Take a quick break. Be back right after this. You're listening to The Vegas Take.